It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. 4 bodies have been recovered in the search for a group of teenage boys in North Wales. The group failed to return home from a camping trip in Snowdonia. Their car was found overturned and partially submerged in water. The Welsh First Minister calls it devastating news. Also tonight, hopes of a breakthrough in the Middle East, with reports a deal has been reached to free some of the hostages taken by Hamas. Around 200 people were abducted on the 7th of October. The Israeli Prime Minister has briefed his government tonight, and Joe Biden says a deal is very close. We'll keep you up to date on developments. Avoidable and unnecessary, the conclusion of a new report into Lancashire Police and their handling of the Nicola Bulley investigation, in which they released personal information about her health. And the BBC confirms it is shelving Top Gear for the foreseeable future after Freddie Flintoff's accident. Former F1 champion Damon Hill joins us to discuss the show's future. All that's come and much more on the UK Tonight. Well, our lead story tonight, the 4 bodies recovered from a car in North Wales following a search for 4 teenage boys missing since Sunday. North Wales police say the car appeared to have left the road in Garreg near Tremadog. It was overturned and partially submerged in water. Well, the search began after the 4 teenagers, Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Wilf Henderson and Hugo Morris, failed to return home to Shropshire after an overnight camping trip in Snowdonia. Shingi Mararike reports from North Wales.
They left together for an adventure and never came home. These 4 friends had driven from Shropshire to Snowdonia for a camping trip before being reported missing on Monday, triggering an extensive search and rescue operation and fears for the worst. A tip-off from a local, followed by a forensics van at the scene, confirmed those fears had turned into an awful reality.
Shortly after 10 a.m. this morning, a member of the public contacted us reporting a vehicle having left the road between Beddgelert and Llanfrothen. Police officers attended and located a Ford Fiesta vehicle upside down, partially submerged in water. Tragically, the bodies of 4 young males were recovered from within the vehicle.
This part of Snowdonia is rugged and remote, so it's understandable to see why the boys would have struggled on these narrow roads in what would have been difficult weather conditions on Sunday.
They were last seen at Porthmadog at midday on Sunday, getting into a silver Ford Fiesta. Police helicopters, Coast Guard and mountain rescue teams scoured a wide search area in the national park. Then, the news the car had been found. A police cordon was set up near the village of Garreg. As night fell, what began as a search with the hope of a rescue ended with the recovery of 4 bodies, leaving the people here shaken.
The whole community is struck a nerve, and it's really the community feel it. I think we also feel a great thanks for the emergency services. They have worked so hard, and the search and rescue teams, they work tirelessly.
A day that began in hope has ended in darkness and loss, and for their families, unimaginable pain. Shingi Mararike, Sky News, Snowdonia National Park.
To developments in the Middle East now, where it is believed that a deal has been struck between Israel and Hamas for the release of hostages, those taken on the 7th of October. Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu summoned his war cabinet and his security cabinet, as well as his government, for meetings this evening, 3 groups, which would need to approve any deal. Well, in the last few minutes, we have been hearing from Benjamin Netanyahu. He has said that the hostages will be released in stages, and also that the war against Hamas will not stop after a ceasefire. So that's Benjamin Netanyahu saying that the hostages will be released in stages. He also said that US President Joe Biden helped to improve this deal to include more hostages. Let's bring in our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's following developments closely from Jerusalem for us tonight. Because, Ali, we understand that a deal is imminent, but as I've just been talking people through, there are various stages that this deal has to go to before it's announced.
Yes, so there's been 3 major meetings tonight. The Israeli War Cabinet, which is a small group of 5 men, including the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Defence Minister Yoav Gallant. From that, it then went to the Security Cabinet, which is a wider body that oversees Israeli national security, and then on to the full cabinet. And they have been meeting over the last hour hour and a half or so. And it appears from what we're hearing from Reuters, the news agency, that meeting is either concluded or is close to wrapping up, and they have managed to achieve an agreement. There was some doubt whether or not it would be unanimous, because a couple of members of the Netanyahu coalition on the far right, particularly Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, had concerns that they'd raised today and suggested that they might oppose a deal. But it looks as though the Israeli government has agreed to proceed with this hostage release deal that has been negotiated primarily by Qatar as mediators, but also with considerable American help. As for the specific details, we'll have to wait, and we assume that in the coming minutes we might receive more about that. But from what we believe we know, and this is because of a sort of a drip feed of information that's come out over the day in Israeli media, somewhere around 50 hostages will be released, women and children, and they will come out in stages over a number of days. In exchange for that, Israel, we think, will release somewhere in the region of 150 Palestinian prisoners who are being held in Israeli prisons, and there will be other concessions as well as part of that agreement, including the fact that Israel will agree not to fly over the Gaza Strip for a certain amount of hours every day. We think somewhere around about 6 hours every day. But Israeli intelligence has said they will not remain blind to what is happening, because, of course, the concern in Israel is that whilst there is a pause in fighting, and if Israeli surveillance aircraft are not allowed above Gaza, then Hamas will use that as an opportunity to regroup, reposition themselves and rearm. So it's looking very likely, almost certain, I would say, that the hostage deal has been agreed by the Israelis, which now paves the way for this truce to happen. It will not happen immediately. There will be a 24-hour period which has to happen under Israeli law, whereby anybody in Israel who has objections to this deal can raise it with the Israeli Supreme Court. So we're not quite there yet, but it looks like we're very, very close. And the other thing I'd say, SJ, is that in the coming 24 hours, I would expect the Israeli military to use that time to push ahead, to press ahead with any objectives that they've got, particularly northern Gaza. And I wouldn't be surprised as well if you see some sort of retaliation, quite sizable retaliation from Hamas in the hours that lead up to that eventual truce.
OK, Ali, thank you. Alistair Bunkle there for us in Jerusalem. Let's talk a bit more about that American help in getting this deal done. Speaking in Washington earlier, President Biden said that the release of the hostages is very close, but nothing is done until it is done. Let's bring in our US correspondent, James Matthews, who is in Washington. And James, Benjamin Netanyahu has been speaking within the last few minutes. And one of the things he said was that President Biden actually secured the release of more hostages as part of this deal.
President Biden, Sarah-Jane, has been at the heart of this. The Americans talk about his involvement on a daily basis, hour by hour. Biden himself has spoken about the release and safe return of hostages as his top priority. The Americans are talking about the practicalities in all of this. They've been quiet on the detail. They didn't want to undermine sensitive negotiations at the last minute, but they have been talking around how it all may unfold, talking about how those held hostage will not be in great shape. It could take hours, it could take days to safely get them back out of the hands of Hamas. They speak about the execution and monitoring of the hostage release because, of course, they are dealing with an unpredictable enemy. Admiral John Kirby of the National Security Council said earlier that they needed to make sure that those who promise to do things will do those things, talking about Hamas and the road ahead. We heard from President Joe Biden in the Roosevelt Room inside the White House earlier today, just when they were on the precipice of this deal. And this is what he had to say about how close they were to a deal to secure the release of hostages.
We're now very close, very close. we could bring some of these hostages home very soon. But I don't want to get into the details of things because nothing is done until it's done. And we have more to say, we will, but things are looking good at the moment.
Now, Israel says it's not negotiating for non-Israelis, but there are around 10 American hostages being held. Most of them, if not all, are dual nationals. So the Americans are in the frame for being released. Officials here say they hope that will include a toddler, 3-year-old Abigail Edan. We heard from her great-aunt on Sky News a few days ago. She was orphaned, both parents killed, and then she was subsequently taken hostage. So there are hopes here that she will be among those released. But for Joe Biden, politically, he needs a result. Polls show that Americans don't rate his performance throughout this conflict, throughout this unrelenting stream of bad news and imagery coming out of the Middle East. He's not always been in sync with the wishes of Israel. There are questions here about the funding that goes towards Israel as an ally and why Biden can't wield more influence. This is some measure of success for him as a diplomat and negotiator, although clearly it's a partial release of hostages. There is some way to go.
James, thank you. James Matthews with the latest there from Washington. Well, it is around 6 weeks since 200 people were taken hostage by Hamas. I first spoke to Noam Sagi 2 days after that attack, when his mother, who lives near the Gaza border, was abducted. Since then, he's faced a desperate wait for news. And Noam joins me in the studio once again tonight. Noam, thank you so much for coming in. There has been no news of your mother, Ada, in the time since we first spoke. And I know you spoke to my colleague Jane Secker on Sky News this week. Just following the developments in the Middle East today, the news that this deal is close, a tentative deal may already have been struck, it just hasn't been signed off yet. Does this give you some hope tonight?
I am more hopeful today than any other day that we're getting closer. From day one, we are engulfed in this psychological torture, and there is lots of ups and downs. The ups are not really ups, but the downs are really downs. So I have to hold on to everything I can. And that seems to be, it seems to happen. What exactly will happen, we still don't know, but at least it's a start. Yeah.
The vulnerable were targeted in that attack 6 weeks ago. We're talking about babies, the frail and elderly, your mother falling into that category. She has severe asthma. And the stories coming out of Gaza of hostages potentially being kept in tunnels underground for that entire time. That has been a real cause for concern for you and your mother's condition, right?
Absolutely. I think for Mum, it's difficult when she is in fresh air and overground. It will be very difficult underground. I know that her inhaler stayed at home. I know that the Red Cross never saw them up till now. So I just hope that she is holding on. I hope that she is finding strength from somewhere. Being in a tunnel with dusty condition, no daylight and no ventilation is probably the worst conditions for her. So I hope.
Well, hope is the only thing that you have, that so many other families have. While all this has been continuing, you, like so many others who are not personally connected to what's going on, have been watching it unfold on the news. That's how you've been getting your information. Have you had any contact with the authorities, whether it be British, Israeli, in terms of keeping you up to date on the search for hostages, these negotiations? Have you had any official contact in that capacity?
So the answer is two. On the UK front, there is zero communication. On the Israeli front, every family have someone that is attached to the family and always update with anything that formal that they can update with. So we know some information. We don't know a lot of information. There is a lot going on in the media that might be right, might be not right. and they insist that for them to give information only based on facts and figures that they have. I hope that what we hear now in the media will come up later as a formal messaging.
For a deal to be struck, there's two sides. Hamas want the release of around, we understand it, 150 Palestinian prisoners, and there are other concessions as well. And Benjamin Netanyahu has talked about the process that you have to go through to secure hostage release. He's talked about, his 3 cabinets that he's had to meet. They've all had to approve it. But also, the Israeli families of those who have died before at the hands of Hamas, they will have a right to appeal any decision because, of course, they have been through the pain of losing loved ones at the hands of Hamas. You are in a similar situation in terms of, Hamas hold your mother and others as well. Is that something you can make peace with, if you like, in terms of you give anything to get your mother back, but there is this uncomfortable trade, isn't there?
Yes and no. I think every life worth everything possible. And I don't think there is a price that is big enough to bring kids back to their mum, to bring mums back to their kids, to bring an orphan back to someone that can give them care and start to help them to make sense of their life. So, of course, there is price, but that is normal and that is expected.
It's the uncomfortable truths of war, isn't it? There is no clean outcome to any of this. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu, the comments he's made today before these cabinet meetings, he's talked about this deal being imminent. We're on the verge of it. There is hope that it's going to happen over the next 24 hours. But he has also said in another breath that despite this, the war will continue until Israel achieves its aims. So you may get your loved ones back, but this war continues, and that in itself must feel pretty devastating in terms of, both sides being caught up in this. This will continue.
I think war is the worst case scenario for everybody. It's the last resort. Of course, it is the case since the 7th of October attack, and Israel had to build leverage in order to bring hostages back. And for me, the most important thing right now is the mechanism, is the fact that Israel wants to have the hostages back, and the Hamas needs, the Palestinian people in Gaza really need no war. They need quiet, and they need some way to get equipment and food and medicine.
There needs to be some respite.
So I think if we have a mechanism in place if this is what I understand, that it will be extended beyond the 5 days that we're talking, and every day of quiet will give more people back, that will start to build some trust and some mechanism to release more hostages and give more quiet and peace to some kind of respite to people who need it the most.
Yeah, for those who are caught up in it, peace is so desperately needed at the moment. Noam, thank you so much for coming to talk to us. We will talk again. We're all thinking of you and your family and, the families of those hostages while we wait for news. But thank you again for coming to talk to us on Sky News. We really appreciate it. And at 9 o'clock tonight here on Sky News, there is a special programme for you with Sky's Yalda Hakim. She is live in Jerusalem. The programme is about the hostage deal that is imminent and what it means for the next stage of this Israel-Hamas war. Stay with us for that. It's coming up straight after the UK Tonight here on Sky News. Now, the national living wage is to increase by more than £1, giving a pay rise to around 2 million people. The Treasury made this announcement on the eve of the autumn statement, where the Chancellor will give an update on the state of the country's economy. That is happening tomorrow. And Jeremy Hunt will be looking for ways to lift the gloom. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, has this report.
Billed as the autumn statement to get Britain growing, it's really about getting the Conservatives going. Today, a very retail offer for 2 million workers, the biggest ever increase to the living wage.
This is a pay rise for up to 3 million workers and is part of our commitment to make sure that we make work pay.
You talked this morning about tax cuts for businesses, tax cuts for individuals. Has it got anything to do with the fact that the Conservatives are now 20 points behind in the polls and you are running out of time?
Well, I think in the last year, the Prime Minister and Chancellor have made some really difficult decisions in the national interest. We've met the Prime Minister's commitment to halve inflation. That's going to make a massive difference to people at home now. And now we're really focused on growth and making sure that we bring the tax burden down.
And many Conservatives believe they need to, and quickly. Tax levels now at their highest in 70 years. The Prime Minister is now talking about this being a time to cut taxes. You must be delighted, aren't you? It's what you've been calling for.
I'm pleased, quite frankly, Beth. You know, if we can start signalling the route, the pathway, that great Conservative journey of moving towards lower taxes, that is to be welcome.
So do you want tomorrow to be the moment where the Prime Minister goes for it and he really kick-starts this general election campaign?
Well, I'm open for that, totally, on the basis that, you know, a year out from an election, we have to be out there speaking about who we are, what we stand for.
You say we as Conservatives believe in low taxes. Does the Prime Minister believe in low taxes?
Beth, you ask him that question.
The answer is yes. The government now changing its tune. For months, we've been told the time isn't right for tax cuts. Well, tomorrow, the Chancellor will say the opposite. Now, apparently, it is, with tax cuts expected for individual workers and businesses too. Now, Treasury insiders will tell you this is all about an improving economic outlook. But make no mistake, there's plenty of politics in this too. The Conservatives are 20 points behind Labour in the polls, and the Prime Minister is running out of time with you, the voters, and his restive party as well. But in marginal Conservative Corby, would tax cuts convince voters to stick with Sunak?
Whether I would vote Conservative, I don't think that alone would sway me, to be fair.
They cut one thing, but they'll take it out of another.
That money has to be paid elsewhere, you know, so is that money going to be paid with the rising cost of fuel? Is it going to be paid with the rising cost of petrol?
Tax cuts expected next spring, now coming early. But are the offerings too little, too late? Beth Rigby, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, I'm going to be in Macclesfield tomorrow, speaking to people and businesses there to find out what they make of Jeremy Hunt's statement. I'll be presenting the UK Tonight from Macclesfield as well at 8 o'clock. But before that, there'll be a live Q&A, and we want you to get involved. If you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can submit your questions for our panel of experts. It could be something to do with your personal finances, your mortgage or your rents, your household bills, or it could be a wider question about the state of the economy. The Q&A is going to be at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon on Sky News, so make sure you get involved. And there's full coverage of the autumn statement from 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. Sophie Ridge will be hosting that right here on Sky News. So to come on the UK Tonight, the Supreme Court rules delivery drivers cannot be classed as employees. We'll tell you what it means for their riders. Also ahead, Downing Street has been heavily criticised for this now edited post on Instagram. But can you tell what's wrong with it and what they changed? That'd be helpful if you could read all of it. And a stunning starling murmuration is caught on camera near Preston. We'll give you the full picture.
I've been doing art for like 20 years. Many people don't know that. I've been doing art for 20 years. And it's a perfect opportunity, doing art with Clarendon galleries. And obviously they've got galleries throughout the country. But if you want to come and see the art all in one place, get down to Covent Garden.
What inspires you?
You know, I kind of got into art just basically because I needed some art for my house.
Really?
Yeah, I just had some white walls and I thought...
Other people go to B&Q, and put a bit of wallpaper
Yeah, I know.
up.
But, I just needed some art for the house. Went to a few galleries, a few exhibitions. And I looked around and I thought, oh, sure, I could do that. I mean, I couldn't, but I attempted to. If you want to see something different art-wise, I'm the one creating it. The story behind the hand grenade is, you know, when a grenade is created to cause destruction, you throw it into the direction of something you want to kill, maim, hurt somebody, you know. And the idea was, you know, I put a heart inside the grenade, so when you throw it in that direction, it creates love. So everything, all my artwork is about positivity and about love. There's nothing negative in my art. And I like to take imagery and turn it on its head. So war is everywhere, do you know what I mean? And it's just terrible. Need more peace in this world, you know. And my artwork kind of reflects a lot of that. It's just good vibe, good feeling, and good, you know, it's about love.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the UK Tonight. Here's what's coming up. A damning report has heavily criticised Lancashire Police's handling of the Nicola Bulley investigation. We'll have the latest from our crime correspondent, Martin Brunt. And the royal red carpet rolled out for the South Korean president as the king hosts a state banquet at Buckingham Palace tonight. Well, let's take you through some of the other stories making news in the UK tonight. And England's chief medical officer has told the COVID inquiry action should have been taken earlier during the pandemic. Sir Chris Whitty said, in hindsight, the UK was a bit too late to lock down during the first wave of coronavirus. Sir Chris also told the inquiry that Boris Johnson's decision-making was quite often chaotic during the pandemic and admitted there were tensions between scientists and politicians.
We had two different things we were trying to balance. The risk of going too early, in which case you get all the damages from this with actually fairly minimal impact on the epidemic, and the risk of going too late, in which case you get all the problems of the pandemic running away. Now, as we will, I'm sure, come on to, my view is, with the benefit of hindsight, we went a bit too late on the first wave, and I've been very clear about that for some time.
The UK's Supreme Court has ruled that Deliveroo riders cannot be recognised as employees or represented by trade unions for collective bargaining. The decision is the latest in a long-running dispute, which began when a union tried to represent a group of riders over pay and conditions. The case was previously dismissed by lower courts, but an appeal was brought to the Supreme Court. The Independent Workers' Union of Great Britain, which brought the case, said the ruling was a disappointment. Downing Street has been accused of failing to understand Northern Ireland after a social media mishap. The official Number 10 Instagram posted this to celebrate a Northern Ireland business event in Downing Street, but they mistakenly used the Irish tricolour flag emoji in that text. The post was swiftly taken down and edited to remove the flag. Rather usefully, the bit you need to see is under that strap that says Downing Street criticised for Instagram post. There we go. Now, thousands of birds have been captured during a murmuration above a nature reserve near Preston. This is the display. It was spotted over Brockholes Nature Reserve, and it's believed to be one of the largest of the year so far. Experts believe murmurations offer protection from predators, as it's not easy to single out a single starling from a whirling group of thousands. Lancashire Police's handling of the Nicola Bulley investigation has been heavily criticised in a damning report released today. The force's decision to publicly reveal details of the mother of two's mental health and alcohol issues were described as avoidable and unnecessary. Senior officers were also criticised for failing to cordon off the area where Nicola went missing and for not advising family members on how to manage requests from the media. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt has this report.
Mother of two, Nicola Bulley, had been missing for more than a fortnight when police made a startling admission.
As soon as she was reported missing, following the information that was provided to the police by her partner Paul, and based on a number of specific vulnerabilities that we were made aware of, Nicola was graded as high risk.
Hours later, in a statement, police revealed that Nicola had significant alcohol issues brought on by her struggles with the menopause. The authors of a damning report said police were wrong to disclose such personal details.
We are in no doubt that releasing this information in the manner the constabulary did was both avoidable and unnecessary.
She was last seen walking her dog Willow along the banks of the River Wyre. Lancashire police also let down Nicola's partner Paul Ansell and their family, said the report, slow to provide support, especially around speculation Mr Ansell was involved in her disappearance. Police should have put a cordon around where Nicola fell in the river and done a thorough forensic search. They did neither because they had ruled out a crime. And they should have kept some control over search specialist Peter Faulding, who was brought in by the family. He insists now that his sonar equipment detected Nicola's body within 6 minutes of starting his search.
I've been doing this since 1999. I've pioneered the use of sonar, so it was very clear to me that this probably was Nicola.
A police team dived the spot, but they did not see a body. The report said Lancashire police had substantial learning to face up to, but for all the criticism, nobody in the force is to face any disciplinary action. Lancashire police were praised for their investigation and search operation and said they would learn from the criticism.
We will unpick the review and we will see, right, OK, where do we need to learn? What will we do differently?
The report also identified wider issues for all policing, ignorance of the impact of social media and a fractured relationship with journalists that it said must be repaired. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Lancashire.
And if you scan this QR code on the screen, there's more from Martin Brunt on today's Sky News Daily podcast. You'll also hear from a former chief constable who claims police don't have a grasp on the importance of social media in modern policing. You can download the Sky News Daily wherever you get your podcasts from. Now, earlier we brought you some comments from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as he briefed his cabinet on the potential deal to secure some of the hostages taken by Hamas. We can bring you some video from the start of that meeting.
Citizens of Israel, ministers of the government, good evening. This meeting, its purpose is to discuss bringing back our hostages, but I would like to begin with something that needs to be obvious. There are some very unnecessary talks outside, like as if after the pause for bringing back our hostages, we will stop the war. I wish to clarify, we are at war and we're going to continue with this war. We're going to continue with the war until we achieve all of our goals to wipe out Hamas, to bring back all of our hostages, all the missing persons, and to guarantee that there won't be any element in Gaza which is threatening Israel. Last night, I met together with the members of the war cabinet, the family members of the hostages. I listened to their distress very carefully. They described in a quivering voice, sometimes with tears, that nightmare they've been living in. And I said to them, dear families, bringing back our hostages is a sacred and most important mission, and I am fully committed to it. Just like Maimonides said, there is no greater mitzvah, there is no greater good deed than bringing back hostages. We will not relent and not cease until we bring them all back, until we release them all. The boys and girls, the fathers and mothers, the young men and women, the elderly, the soldiers, all of them.
Still to come on the UK tonight, we'll cross to Buckingham Palace, where the King is hosting the South Korean president for a state banquet. And as one of the BBC's biggest shows, Top Gear, is shelved for the foreseeable future, I'm going to speak to the former F1 world champion, Damon Hill. welcome back to the UK Tonight. Now, the BBC has said that Top Gear won't return for the foreseeable future. This is after one of the hosts, Andrew Flintoff, was seriously injured in a crash last year. The former England cricketer was airlifted to hospital after a crash in December. Last month, the broadcaster announced it had reached a financial settlement with Flintoff, thought to be around £9 million. Well, I'm joined now by the 1996 Formula One world champion, Damon Hill. Damon, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm just on my way to Abu Dhabi, so excuse me if I get called for my flight.
No problem. I know these Grand Prix come round, fast and furiously. We've just had Vegas. You're off to Abu Dhabi. Let's talk about Top Gear. You've been on it. Are you a fan? Do you want to see it come back at some stage?
Look, to be honest, it's a program that I didn't watch religiously. I'm not a huge car fan myself, but it was, when you did watch it, of course, it was massively entertaining, and all the presenters were brilliant. And it's such a shame that this has happened. Of course, Freddie's injuries are terrible, and it's really tragic that they've had to finally in the long running show. I mean, I don't know how long Top Gear has been going on for. It must be many decades now, actually, but. It's terribly sad, and all you can say is that when you start playing with fast vehicles, things can happen, things can go wrong, and there was always a chance that something could happen. Of course, Richard Hammond also had an accident in the previous incarnation of the crew, but I hope that Freddie, is able to recover fully as much as possible, and maybe one day it will be back again.
Yeah, I mean, it did say it's been shelved for the foreseeable future, so it may be with the passing of time that they feel it's appropriate to bring it back. But with shows like this, I mean, the presenters themselves are not racing drivers. It's not like they've got a Damon Hill testing these cars, whether it be reasonably priced or a top supercar. Is that the concern, that you've got people who perhaps haven't had adequate training, not just testing cars, but doing stunts as well?
Well, with certain people like Chris Harris and also Jeremy, you have to remember they were motor journalists, so they're pretty proficient drivers, and you are used to pushing the limits in vehicles and stuff. So, I mean, there may be an element of Freddie not being sufficiently experienced, if you like, in doing those sort of driving things. And I don't exactly know the details of the accident, and I don't think anyone does actually, but. So, it's something that people need to be properly prepared for before they get involved in anything to do with speed or vehicles. They used to have celebrities driving a reasonably priced car, but they did have it on a circuit which has got a considerable amount of open space, and the chances of something seriously going wrong on that was very small, and they had all the safety precautions in place. But, you're never completely sure that nothing can happen when you're going fast.
Look, and I guess the risk element was part of the attraction of the show as well, because, there were prangs, there were crashes, not of a serious nature, like the one that Andrew Flintoff was involved in. But just in terms of it coming back, it was such a big money earner for the BBC. It had so many fans. This was a real global show. So with that in mind, is there hope for a comeback, do you think?
I think they're going to have to review everything they do with regards to safety. I'm sure they'll absolutely be doing that anyway. And you can't make things completely safe and make it entertaining, though. I wonder about that. I mean, I don't know what the chances of injury are in Strictly Come Dancing or something like that. I mean, anything can happen once you're on the move. So, but they pushed the limits on some of the stunts. They really did push the limits, particularly with Jeremy, who I seem to remember driving into a brick wall in a truck or something at one time. But the participants have to understand the risks that they're exposing themselves to, but that's no consolation if something goes wrong.
I love that you've just ruled yourself out of Strictly by saying it's too dangerous, Damon. I also like that you said. I also like that you said that you don't really like cars, because we had an exchange on social media not so long ago where I had put the wrong fuel in my car, and you replied to me on social media, went, "We've all been there. Love you for that." Love you for that.
Absolutely, yes. I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Well, look, Damon, safe flight. Thank you for coming on to talk to us on the UK tonight. I should just read out a statement from the BBC, which says, while BBC Studios has complied with the required BBC policies and industry best practice in making the show, there were important learnings which would need to be rigorously applied to future Top Gear UK productions. Learnings included a detailed action plan involving changes in the ways of working, such as increased clarity on roles and responsibilities, and better communication between teams for any future Top Gear productions. So that is Top Gear shelved, but perhaps not forever. Now, let's bring you some live pictures from Buckingham Palace. There are flashing lights, just to warn you, photographers there, so just to warn you about flash photography. The King hosting a state banquet tonight in honour of the President of South Korea. Let's bring in our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, who's here with me. Laura, this is all very fancy.
Isn't it just? This is kind of seen as, the real showpiece when it comes to a state visit, which is seen as, for the UK, one of the biggest greetings you can give a visiting dignitary or a leader. You can see the King and Queen have now taken their seats, and before they sit down to the meal, the King is due to make a short speech, and we've heard him make a similar speech this time last year when he was hosting his first incoming state visit as king, when he hosted the South African president. Now it is the turn, the president of South Korea. We're expecting him to speak soon. We saw a lot of the ceremony a little bit earlier today when the president and his wife were greeted at Horse Guards Parade. There was the Guard of Honour. He got to inspect, the national anthems were played. You had the gun salutes being fired as well before that traditional carriage procession all the way down the Mall back to Buckingham Palace. It really was that classic example of the soft power of the king on full parade, really, the king using this role. He doesn't choose who comes on these visits. That's a decision made by the government. But the king hosting him, and the ballroom at Buckingham Palace there, sort of laid out to the nth degree, really, with quite a show. It will be one of these big, spectacular kind of ceremonial moments. And I think the king now speaking.
Madam Kim Keon-hee. It gives my wife and myself great pleasure to welcome you to Buckingham Palace this evening. Yungu Ge, Ushin Gusul, Hwanyang Hamnida. As we mark the 140th anniversary of our two nations' diplomatic relationship, your visit to the United Kingdom celebrates our remarkable partnership. It is a partnership in which close personal connections, fostered over many decades, have blossomed today into a real sense of affection, or chung, between our societies at so many levels. We also wonder at the remarkable journey your nation has taken in the span of a single lifetime, my lifetime, in fact. From wartime devastation at the time of my early childhood, Koreans have created a miracle. Even at the time of my last visit in 1992, that journey was clearly just beginning. The Republic of Korea's drive and energy continued apace, and with it, the impact on British lives, from fridges and flat screens to smartphones and semiconductors. It is clear that the model of industrial efficiency I glimpsed in Seoul 30 years ago has become the epitome of technological creativity today. But it is probably artistic creativity which has brought about the most dramatic shift in Korea's place in the British cultural landscape. 3 decades ago, it would have been hard to imagine that the most popular exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum in 2023 would be Hallyu, showcasing the Korean wave, or that Korean would become the fastest growing modern language among those studied at British universities. Korea has matched Danny Boyle with Bong Joon-ho, James Bond with Squid Game and the Beatles' Let It Be with BTS's Dynamic or Dynamite. Our cultures share...
Well, it feels like a good time to leave the King's speech, or perhaps not, as he references K-pop. King Charles there speaking at the state banquet where he's welcoming the South Korean leaders and dignitary. Laura Bondock, our royal correspondent, is along with me, mentioning Squid Games, K-pop, and he even spoke in Korean. A good effort from the King this evening.
I was expecting that. We hear him do this every time he makes a big speech at these state visits, incoming or outgoing. You'll hear him sort of stepping into a different tongue. Yeah, I love the reference to James Bond and Squid Game. I cannot imagine for a second the King sitting down.
He's definitely watched one of the two. I'll let you guess which one.
He listens to BTS on the gramophone. No. So, look, the state visits are always these big diplomatic displays, but there is, behind the pomp and the pageantry that we always see, a political purpose, and it's very much seen as the greatest of invitations, a sign of the value that the UK places on an international relationship. And, you know, we've had the ceremonial today, you know, from Horse Guards Parade ending up at the banquet, and we'll get more of the business side of it, the politics coming along tomorrow. But I think South Korea is seen as this important strategic partner in a region that obviously involves this sort of fragile relationship between Russia and North Korea at the moment. So that's the politics behind it. But you get all this, and you get the tiaras coming out, don't you? We're also told that the King's cipher is now being etched onto the glasses. Each of those table places, where there's 171 guests, has 6 glasses, and they're all kind of scratching off the late Queen's cipher and putting the King's on. It's taking so long. I think it's only the top table that's got his cipher on those glasses before they sit down to, and I don't know if you're interested in the menu, a tartlet of poached egg and spinach, Windsor pheasant with a mango ice cream bomb for pudding.
Oh, that'll be the sound of my stomach rumbling. Didn't have dinner before I came on air. Thanks for that, Laura. Laura, thank you very much. The King welcoming the South Korean president there at Buckingham Palace. And now I hope the King's got us on record on Sky, because he'd love this next story. We like to bring you something weird and wonderful on the show, and this might look like something from a Bush Tucker trial, but it could be coming to a seafood restaurant near you. These are shipworms, or to give them another name, naked clams. They eat wood and, as such, are something of a marine pest. But researchers are saying they are an alternative food source that can be as nutritious as meat or fish, and they're hoping to become the first people in the world to farm these creatures. Well, I'm joined now by Dr. David Willer from the University of Cambridge's Department of Zoology. So the UK could be farming these worms. Talk me through a bit of the reasoning behind it, why you would want to harvest these for food.
I appreciate it's a strange request. These are the creatures which are responsible for stranding Columbus in the Caribbean. They ate his boat. But the key thing here is we have an organism which does something pretty remarkable. It can convert wood into nutrient-packed protein, rich in B12, rich in micronutrients.
Have you tried one?
So they taste like oysters. So they're really quite appealing, actually. But our vision is for a mass market product, really. So this is the sort of thing you put in your fish fingers and your fish cakes and that kind of thing.
OK, so I like this. So this would be seen as a supplement to food. You know, I mean, gosh, we've talked about all sorts of different food types here on Sky News, you know, everything from 3D printed steaks to, you know, various other bits of protein. But, you know, I don't think we've quite covered worms before. How long is all this going to take? Obviously, there's going to be potentially this farm in Devon. You know, what kind of scale would this have to be at?
Well, so we're really envisioning a big scale here. You know, if you're trying to do something sustainable, it's no good doing it and selling it to a restaurant every 2 weeks. It's got to be something which is in every single supermarket around the country to actually make a big impact on people's nutrition and health. So our vision is for large open sea farms or large urban setups for this, and for this to be put into foods that people are familiar with already. You know, that's your fish fingers, burgers, fish cakes, battered, that kind of thing.
How long are we away from that, do you think?
I think that all depends on the willingness of investors to get involved.
OK. All right, Dr. David Willer, you never know. One day it could be on the menu at a state banquet in Buckingham Palace. Thank you very much for joining us to talk about shipworms. We're going to talk about the sport with Teddy. Do you fancy shipworms as some form of high-value protein?
I was going to say protein. It might be good. It's the buzzword now in terms of your satiety, keeping you full.
Yeah,
so maybe.
For athletes as well. Let's talk about Newcastle. Shipworms not on the menu there, but I tell you what is on the menu: signing players from the Saudi League. This is going to prove controversial, right?
Yeah, big vote today in the Premier League. There were all the clubs voting on this. Would there be a ban on players coming in January from affiliated clubs? So actually 11 Premier League clubs currently. Would be 12 if Manchester United have Sir Jim Ratcliffe on their ownership board soon. But the big one is Newcastle United, owned by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund, who also own or have a controlling share in 4 clubs in the Saudi Pro League, including Cristiano Ronaldo, stars like that, but potentially, crucially, a midfielder to replace Sandro Tonali. So Newcastle up against it at the moment, competing on many fronts. They've got 7 players injured, and of course the Italian star Tonali is facing a season-long ban because of betting breaches. So it's very interesting in terms of how it played out, and interesting that all those clubs are owned. And 13 voted in favour of this ban, 7 against. You needed 14 for the ban to come in. So in January, Newcastle and other clubs will be allowed to look at their affiliated clubs for players.
So what do you think the likely deals will be? Who are the top players in the Saudi? I mean, you mentioned Cristiano Ronaldo, but...
He's a star at Al Nassr. He's 39 in February. I mean, Newcastle are currently vying with Manchester United for a Champions League place. Yeah. They're a point apart in the Premier League, so that'd be a great subplot after he had that ignominious exit. But the big one, I suppose, looking at it, when there's people like Karim Benzema in there and things like that, it will be possibly Ruben Neves, the Al Hilal midfielder, 26 years of age, went as a big surprise, Wolves captain, went to Saudi in the summer. Potentially him to fill that void left by Sandro Tonali could be the big one.
OK, interesting developments. Teddy, thank you.
Thank you.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Welcome to the Roast restaurant here in central London. We are lucky enough today to be joined by 3 elite athletes. Now they're going to be cooking a cultural dish all related to their heritage. It's going to be fun. Let's go see who they are. Right, we're very lucky. We found a gap in the training schedule of a great British Olympic athlete. Lavia Nilsson's joined us in the kitchen, cooking for us today. What have you got for us, Lavia?
So this is a traditional Sudanese dish. That's my mum's heritage. It's called mahshi in Arabic, but it's basically a stuffed vegetable dish. It's got rice, and we're doing a vegan version today with some brown lentils instead of mincemeat. So yeah, really excited about it. My sister and I, we learned from our mum, you know, the value of a home-cooked meal.
And you're sort of growing up in your household, you said your mum was Sudanese and Egyptian, and you...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Right, let's have a quick look at the weather before we wrap things up.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
The rest of this week will be overall drier and less windy, but it will turn noticeably colder by Friday. Before then, most places will have a dry evening, but the windy north of Scotland and Kent will have some rain. Northern parts will see wind and rain moving in overnight, with coastal gales developing across northern Scotland. The calmer south will be mainly dry. There'll be patches of frost and fog developing under the clearest skies. Ireland and Northern Ireland... Ireland and northern areas of the UK are going to be cloudy tomorrow morning with outbreaks of rain or drizzle. Wales will turn increasingly dull and damp as well. Elsewhere, mainly dry with hazy spells of sunshine. It's going to be mild in the windy north and west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
That's all from the UK tonight. As ever, catch up on all the highlights on our webpage. Just scan the QR code on your screen. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be live from Macclesfield for the autumn statement. See you then.